Good morning and afternoon. Welcome to the Recruiters Network webinar on managing and navigating remote internships and university recruiting programs. We're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Jason Buss. I'm the founder of the Recruiters Network. The Recruiters Network is an organization founded 10 years ago, focused on professional development and networking opportunities for recruiting professionals nationally. We host a variety of events, educational conferences, meetups, and charitable giving events throughout the US each year. And in the last 10 years, we've had 40,000 recruiting professionals attend our events. If you're not familiar with the Recruiters Network, we have many locations throughout the US. And while we're sheltering in place, we're obviously doing a lot of virtual events like today's webinar. If you'd like to learn more information, you can visit our website at recruiters.network. As far as the logistics for today, everyone who is on the webinar today will receive the slides and recording Q&A. So if you have any questions throughout the webinar, feel free to put that into the chat and we'll get to questions as quickly as we can towards the end. And if you're on Twitter, you can follow us at Recruit Networks, and the hashtag for today's event is RecNet. I also wanted to take a moment and thank our sponsor, Alio. Alio is an organization committed to the professionals as well, and they have generously sponsored today's webinar. I also want to say thank you to our speakers. We have three very talented recruiting professionals joining us today, so I want to take a moment to have them introduce themselves, and we'll get started with them. So Emily, why don't you start?
Great. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. My name is Emily. I run campus recruiting at MongoDB. For those who don't know, is a tech company in New York. I've been with the company for about 5 years now, kind of transitioning from a campus recruiter, senior campus recruiter, to running the program. So I'm really excited to be here.
Great. Thanks, Emily. Josh?
Hey, good day, everyone. Josh Ligon here. I have been working in the talent acquisition space a little over 20 years across several industries: manufacturing, financial, agriculture, most recently in the healthcare sector. Yeah, I just came in with this organization about 7 months ago as Associate Director of Early Careers, and have been in the early career space probably about half of my time in my professional career, so probably about 11, 12 years. So thank you very much for having us, Jason, and looking forward to the conversation today.
Great, thanks, Josh. Kristen?
Hey, everyone. Super excited about our conversation today, and thank you, Jason, for organizing this panel and bringing all of us together. My name is Kristen, and I manage the university recruiting team here at Pinterest. I've spent the last 3 years as part of the Pin family, but I've been in the university space for around 6 years now. I originally started my career in healthcare consulting and quickly learned that I didn't see myself in that space long term. And that's when I found myself in university recruiting and really haven't looked back since. Excited to chat with you all today.
Great, thank you. So we'll go ahead and get started with the questions. So I thought the best place to start would be talking about how did you get to the decision to continue with your internship program this summer? I know a lot of organizations were faced with competing priorities. Some were faced with budget cuts. Some companies canceled their programs. Some scaled them back slightly, but are continuing. And some are moving full steam ahead. So if you could give us some insights into what were those conversations like, who was involved in those conversations that led you to the decisions that you made for the summer. So Emily, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, so looking back on the month of March is how many different people I was meeting with in order to make this work. Essentially what it came down for us was our intern program is a feeder to our new grad program. The whole point is conversion, and it's a huge funnel of talent for us. So ours is mainly engineering, and about 30% of our engineers come from this program. So it's pretty big. So really, ultimately, I needed the buy-in from the VPs of engineering first. This is for them and to support them, and they were all for it. It's interesting because I heard from a colleague who used to work at Bloomberg that around the 2008 financial crisis, they decided to cancel their program and said it was one of their biggest regrets that they had made during that time, because it just derailed them from continuing through, even though we have to make some modifications. So they were number one, but there were a lot of other people that were involved. The next big one was working with payroll. We weren't registered in every state. So if every intern is going to be remote, you know, how do we pay them in every state? And then what's the sales quota in each state so we know how much we're taxed? So lots of conversations with accounting and legal, HR operations, and they've been so helpful for us, which was wonderful. Of course, we needed sign off from our CFO and CEO, but ultimately everyone decided that this is a really important program for us to continue forward. Fortunately, we are in the, we didn't have to make any scale backs within our company. If we did, I think that would have been a much harder decision, but we're continuing to move full steam ahead, which is nice. With the program, some other decisions that needed to be made. We had some open positions and really had to look at those open intern positions and say, how important is it to hire this person, or can we close this role down? And so we did that for quite a few of them, really focusing on those engineering, technical, hard to fill talent in order to secure that as a pipeline moving forward. Lots of conversations, super difficult, but very happy that we landed where we did.
Okay, great. Thanks, Emily. Josh, how about you?
Yeah, I think the first question we had was can we do this, right? We came to an agreement quickly that we felt that was possible, and our partners in the business were of the same mindset. And from there, really, it was just a true partnership with the business. We have our early careers team, but the way UnitedHealth Group is structured, we have UnitedHealth Group, UnitedHealth Care, and Optum. And they each kind of run things a little bit their own way. And so it was kind of bringing everyone together and getting on the same page. Some differences here and there, but by and large, things were running similarly. But from there, it was then we worked closely with the leaders in the business to align priorities, timing, and communications. We felt it was very important to keep our interns informed of the latest and greatest as we had that information. And the responses that we received from our interns has been overwhelmingly positive. Certainly when you make these decisions, you're keeping your brand in mind as well. No company wants to have to rescind an offer, nor call career services at the campuses we partner with and tell them that we're not going to be able to bring their students on for the summer. We've been very fortunate that given that we're in the healthcare space and that industry, we've not slowed down our hiring. During this pandemic, our jobs in healthcare and in this space are extremely critical. We have tens of thousands of workers on the front line who are dealing with this virus every day, and they've done so with grace and courage. So we're just happy that we've been able to continue that. We'll be doing it virtually, remotely, and are moving forward from there.
Okay, great. Thanks, Josh. And Kristen, how about the Pinterest team?
Yeah, so our approach was very similar to both Emily and Josh's. So one of the very first questions we asked ourselves was, as a university team, do we think we can successfully run a 100% remote program? This is uncharted territory for most university teams, but we've built the infrastructure. We know the ins and outs of our programs. We've built the processes, and we know best whether or not it's actually possible. So once we were aligned there and had the team aligned, we moved forward to get buy-in from our executive sponsors and key stakeholders, which included our head of engineering, our engineering leadership sponsors, head of recruiting, aka you, Jason, and then of course many of our cross-functional partners that play a critical role in setting our programs up for success and helping them make this transition to being fully remote. So that included payroll, ops, onboarding, IT. I mean, one of our biggest concerns was, can we secure laptops for 60 interns? In terms of factors considered and how we presented the business case, one of our main points that we made was that our intern, similar to what Emily was mentioning, our intern program is a pipeline program for the majority of our entry-level positions, aka our new grad roles, and keeping the entire program would yield the highest number of full-time intern conversions. In addition, our internal data has shown that intern conversions get promoted more quickly. In terms of retention, they tend to stick around longer than the average employee. So those were some main points, in addition to things like brand, which I know Josh touched on. And then lastly, our Eng team's capacity plan for interns. They rely on the intern workforce so much during those summer months, and they really depend on their support to contribute to our OKRs.
Great. Thanks, Kristen. Kristen, we'll keep it with you for the next question. So we're obviously all remote. Our interns will be remote. So I want to talk a little bit about onboarding. So what have you done to prepare managers to successfully onboard interns? And then how is your team involved in that as well? And have you made any changes to what you would typically do given the remote factor?
Yeah, so my team is responsible for preparing managers to successfully onboard their intern and mentors. But before we took any action after deciding that we were going to do this, we were going to take the program remote, we created a focus group that was made up of future mentors and managers so that we could learn what types of concerns and questions folks had about hosting a remote intern program. Again, this has never been done before for most companies. And so the takeaways from that session really helped us prepare for mentor-manager training, which is a mandatory requirement and a main component of our intern program and helping managers be set up for success. So some of the topics that we touch on during that training, in addition to some of the tactical things like overview of the program, review process, we talked a lot about belonging and fostering a growth mindset, which is more important now than ever, given the remote working dynamic. It's much easier to forget to add an intern to a team meeting or a virtual happy hour when they're not sitting right next to you. We also encouraged participation and surfaced opportunities for feedback workshops and unconscious bias trainings. And then on the more tactical side, project scoping docs are something that we've done and relied on year over year. And that doc is essentially the interns onboarding plan. And so we asked managers and mentors to complete these even before the intern starts to make sure they're providing clarity around things like what Slack channels should the intern be joining, mailing lists, adding interns to reoccurring team meetings, linking helpful docs. Something that we identified that was feedback we received from interns in the past was that they didn't understand all of the acronyms being used within our engineering teams. So accessing things like providing links and information like that. And then of course, defining key relationships. Who should the intern be doing weekly one-on-ones with? Who should they be meeting with within their first week, which is something that we practice when we onboard full-time hires as well, right? In terms of intern onboarding, so my team holds the role of both facilitator and coordinator. And really, it requires all hands on deck for those first couple of weeks that interns are onboarding to help troubleshoot any roadblocks during those first couple of weeks. So for orientation as a whole, we do lean quite a bit on our new hire orientation team, and especially this year, because we've leveraged the approach and the content that they've created to help onboard our full-time employee workforce. And so our intern onboarding process closely mirrors that of full-time employees, with the exception of a couple of sessions that are run by my team that go over things like events and then more in-depth overview of the review process.
Great, thank you. Sounds like a lot of changes and adapting to these times. So Josh, why don't we focus on what you have done to help managers think about that as well?
Yeah, so at UHG, the business is responsible for the overall internship programming. And with that, each year they provide a manager readiness series for the hiring managers, which takes the manager through step by step what they should expect and what they'll need to do in anticipation of their intern starting. Obviously, that's going to look a little bit different this year, and the business has adjusted their training accordingly. Manager readiness trainings will now include how to lead remote interns and cultivating networking mentorships remotely. If we look at how the early career team specifically is involved with the onboarding, similarly to what Kristen mentioned, it's more around the logistics, that administrative piece. They're responsible for the initial outreach to the interns, notifying them that their onboarding is being initiated, and then all the things that they can expect and that will go along with that. It's a critical component to the process because at this point, they've really been the face of the organization and the one that has been having that interaction with the candidate or the intern. So we feel that's very important. In addition to that, then we send out all relevant information to another part of our team, which are our talent acquisition service advisors, or TASs. And they are then completing the behind the scenes logistics of the onboarding process, initiating backgrounds, drug screens, which fortunately were put on hold for what's going on, and things like that. So between the business and our early careers team, that's how that's been handled or being handled by our organization.
Okay, great. Thanks. Emily, anything to add for MongoDB?
Not much. I mean, like Josh said, for a logistical piece, it's, between the people operations team and the campus team to make sure that they're onboarded properly. From a mentorship piece, we do training as well. And I think everyone should be doing mentor training, virtual or otherwise, but certainly in a virtual experience, I think it's important. The one thing I'll say is that our mentors are not necessarily managers in real life. In fact, this is an opportunity for them to get to that level and sort of dip their toes in and see if they like management. And interns are great guinea pigs for a ton of things, and this is one of them. And so what that means, though, is that they need even more training with feedback and with check-ins and communication. And so we feel really responsible as a campus team to help facilitate that coaching for them. And then on top of that, doing that in a virtual setting.
Great. We have a couple of questions that have come in, so we'll try to get some of the live questions, as many as we can. So one question is whether or not your internships were shortened at all. So I don't know if I guess any of you could share any insights, or are you keeping the same schedule that you used previously?
I can answer, at least for us, Jason. We did make the decision that there would be a delayed start with the internship, so we pushed that back 2 weeks. A big decision factor with that was just allowing hiring managers to prepare and determine what that was going to look like for their interns to do this from a virtual perspective. And then depending on the business, there's some different decisions that are being made on when those will end. Some have stuck with the original date, so it would be an 8-week internship rather than a 10-week. Others have decided to push that out an additional 2 weeks so that they can have that time on their projects. A lot of that too, as we probably all know, is being driven by when people will be going back to campus. So we will look at those on a case-by-case basis. But ultimately, it was delayed 2 weeks and pushed back to June 15th.
We did the same thing. We pushed ours later for everyone to prepare, but also coincidentally, we had a huge event, virtual event that's taking place the week before. So just to ease the stress of the teams, we moved that to June 15th. We also decreased to 8 weeks. 8 weeks was the maximum, the minimum that we could get in order to get signal for that conversion. And we wanted to stay true as much as we possibly could, but being remote provided a lot of constraints. And frankly, I think we're in a better place than we were when we made the decision, but I still think it does make sense for us to shorten during this time of uncertainty. We also, for all of our interns who are sophomores, or will not be graduating, we changed the program to be a learning and development internship program. So instead of doing project-based work on teams, they will be doing job shadowing, technical training, soft skill training, which is a little bit different. It was obviously not the best case scenario, but we just had so many interns and didn't want to stretch our engineering teams too thin with all the remote work and, people being parents and, all the constraints that were coming during this time. So we opted to do that and still provide a really great experience for them where they can still build skills and build their resume, but lessen the burden of our engineers. It was well received. 2 people had opted, I'll just maybe interview next year, which is fine, but everyone else seems really excited about it, and we are too. So if anyone has questions about that, I'm happy to talk about it.
Great, thank you. All right, let's, Emily, why don't we stay with you? I wanted to talk a little bit about how you create that community and kind of cohort feel across all interns, regardless of the role they're playing or the team that they're on. So typically, I think most organizations have team building activities or offsites or happy hours. So I'm curious how you're going to try to keep that consistency with the remote aspect.
Yeah, this is a big one, right? Because community is such a big driver for our conversion. So to not have that, this is like what keeps me up at night. But I think we've come up with a lot of really great ideas given the circumstances. We want to, first of all, a lot of the vendors that we normally use, like paint nights or escape the rooms, there's a bunch of virtual options now that have been created, which are really fun. Museum, like hackathons and stuff. So we've been utilizing the resources of vendors who have also been creative during this time. Trivia nights, and there's a lot of different things that you can do with all the different apps and virtual stuff that we all probably have dabbled in a little bit during this time to connect with friends and family. So that's one thing. There's also other really great integrations that the company already has, like if anyone uses Slack and doing coffee roulette, that's an amazing opportunity to randomize networking. So I think the biggest piece that I'm worried about, because we can create these fun activities still, albeit they're not as fun as going to a Broadway show, but it's still pretty fun. The piece that I'm sad about and worried about and thinking about is, those random connections of playing ping pong together or bumping elbows in the hallway. How do we create those in an environment that isn't stressful and isn't too coerced, right? And I think I've always said the more roots that an intern can plant in a company and the more people they know and the more that they feel like they belong, the better chance of having them come back. So how can we plant more roots? So we're thinking creatively on things like that. Maybe setting up interviews with different managers of different teams to sort of learn how they operate, maybe expensing an Uber Eats gift card and grabbing lunch with someone, right? A virtual lunch with someone. So we're thinking of all these different opportunities to maintain that, but we certainly don't want to exhaust anyone. So it's a balance for sure.
Okay, great. Kristen, how about you? How have you thought about that community feel and what plans have you put in place?
Yeah, I completely agree with Emily on this one. I honestly think that this is one of the toughest things to solve for when taking an internship program remote. When we think about when interns go to share their experience with their peers, they often focus on the company culture and how the job made them feel, all things that are enhanced by keeping the intern community connected and your talent brand strong. And so I think also, like, on the other hand, like, we can offer virtual networking opportunities and endless virtual events, but it's really going to depend on how much the interns lean in to those opportunities we've provided. It's so much easier to opt out when you're remote, so that definitely does concern me. Some of the things that we're doing, though, to create and build a community feel here at Pinterest are hosting homerooms. So these are weekly meetings that are run by recruiters, and we're having different topics that we're touching on. Probably are going to be hosted on Monday mornings, just to kind of like kick off the week and bring together a smaller group of interns and their respective recruiters. We've also launched an onboarding buddy program where we've paired each intern with a fellow intern on their first day. And we paired folks based on degree level and then the engineering org that they're joining. Since their onboarding schedules will be almost identical, so they have someone they can kind of go to if they have any questions or aren't feeling comfortable about something. And then we're also doing a new grad buddy program. So this is kind of using this and leveraging this as an early sell program. So it's an opportunity for interns to not only build their network, but also just make relatable connections with new grads, especially new grads who were former interns and have been through the program, have faced a lot of the same challenges. And they're just there as an additional resource. And then again, hopefully can sell Pinterest from day one. We're also doing things like lightning talks where interns can opt in and talk about hobbies, maybe specific technical knowledge that they want to share with their peers. So these will be sessions led by interns, should they opt in, of course. We're doing an employee resource group fair, so connecting our interns to the different communities within Pinterest. That was really important, and this is something we do try to focus on year over year. And so usually we do a career fair style, but we're thinking about and brainstorming ways that we can do that virtually. And then of course, like all the fun virtual events, like Emily was mentioning, so we're doing like tie-dye, candle making, Our goal was to offer events that gave the most insight to our company culture and tied directly back to our mission. So that's kind of where a baseline that we used when we thought about like what types of virtual events are we going to be doing.
Great. Josh, anything to add on that piece?
Yeah, good commentary there from both Emily and Kristen. One thing that we're going to be looking to implement is the use of an app called Double Dutch. Not sure if anybody's familiar with that. We had first used this tool earlier in the year for a national event that was hosted by our Optum business. That was for newly hired associates within the last 9 months. They'd all gone out to DC for this event, and they utilized this app to share the agenda, the breakout sessions, the workshops, and just keep everybody in touch and in communication. So the idea is to use that for our interns as well to help hopefully create that community environment, give them that opportunity to continue to interact with each other. It'll also be a means to push out information regarding these virtual events, the different activities that will be going on, as well as even project updates for what's going on within their internship assignment and the work that they're doing there. So it'll be interesting to see how that works across the span of an internship rather than just kind of one localized or focused event, but encourage really positive feedback from the national event and then hoping that translates well to the internship this summer as well.
Okay. Josh, why don't we stay with you? I wanted to talk just a little bit about any insights that you have from interns as they've thought about, obviously, the changes that have taken place the last couple of months and they're preparing for remote experience as well. Any, trends you're seeing, any concerns that they're sharing?
Yeah. I think overall, Jason, our interns are feeling very positive. First and foremost, they're happy to still have an internship this summer, which is good, and that we're able to provide that. I think the thought and the effort that we put in to stay connected with them throughout this situation has been received well as well. In addition to communications, we also sent out surveys to get a sense of what they were thinking. We inquired about their housing situations and what that might look like and would they maybe still need assistance in that regard. Even just things like their Wi-Fi availability, right? And would they have the opportunity to connect with that? I think knowing that they're coming to an organization that's really at the forefront of what's going on is a big draw for them as well. I think the biggest concern we're hearing is really around logistics. When will I receive my equipment? What equipment can I expect to receive? How will I be able to track that? We're actually establishing to kind of help with that what we're calling a war room. Not sure I'm real keen on that title, but we're prior to the start of their internship, we're going to have tech professionals on a dedicated line where they can assist interns in getting their software set up. So I think sometimes those are things that we might tend to overlook, but trying to put those things into place to help them feel as prepared as possible. So.
Great. All right, why don't we switch and talk a little bit about still staying on topic with interns, how you're coaching them to prepare. So we talked a little bit about what are you doing with your team and managers. Just curious what kinds of tips or advice you're giving interns as they, for the first time too, likely will be working remotely. So Emily, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, so in order to prepare, one thing we did that we've never done before was we did a pre-summer webinar in order to just like connect with everyone and see how things were going and sort of do a AMA just to calm nerves and everything. And that went really well. And then going into the summer, we're going to have a lot of resources for them. So in years past, we've had an intern website. So this would be like a dedicated site that hopefully is the first thing that pops up when they wake up in the morning. This is like what they go to, right? And so it can talk about all the different social activities for the day and what's on the agenda and things like that. Other resources like we're creating a code of conduct for the first time, which frankly we probably should have done before, but a virtual code of conduct that's like, how should I be in a Zoom? So if you're in a meeting with over 15 people, maybe make sure you're muted. And you know, if your Wi-Fi isn't working very well, maybe turn your video off because that could be helpful. When is it best to Slack versus when is it best to email? And creating all these resources, security best practices that are with the company for them to set them up for success as much as possible. And then also our team normally meets with our interns and our mentors on a bi-weekly basis to make sure they're feeling challenged and having fun and enjoy what they're doing. Because I can't interact with them as much in the halls and stuff, we're doing that on a weekly basis now. I think the more communication and the more check-ins that you can have are the better. And also, particularly interesting about this generation, not that, you know, stereotypes apply to individuals, we know that. I'm a millennial, so I get it. But Gen Z really prefers to be checked in on. They're not going to raise their hand as much. They're self-learners. And so being able to do that for them and for this generation is going to be extremely important, especially now that we're remote.
Awesome. Thanks, Emily. Kristen, how about you? What kinds of things have you and the team thought about on how to coach and prep interns for this experience?
Yeah, so in true Pinterest fashion, we have a work from home tips and tricks Pinterest board. This is actually something that all employees have access to, but it's a great starting point for interns to learn about establishing a routine and remembering to take frequent breaks to prevent burnout. We're hoping that because all universities have shifted class to being remote, that the change isn't going to be too drastic for them. And hopefully they've started to adopt certain habits to help the transition go a little bit more smoothly. In terms of advice and like additional tips that we provided, so we provided guidance on like things like working hours. So syncing with your mentor and manager on day one, and aligning schedules, especially if you're in different time zones, right? Like we have interns who are spread all across the nation. The majority of our engineers sit in Pacific Standard Time because our engineering offices are in San Francisco and Seattle. But we have interns who are on the East Coast and are going to be collaborating with those teams here on the West Coast. Similar to what Emily was mentioning, we talked a lot about virtual expectations. We have a casual work culture, which is great, but the line can be blurred, especially when working remotely from home. So we tried to make it clear that interns should still show up on time for one-on-ones, come prepared to meetings, not cancel meetings last minute. And we want them to put their best foot forward, even if they're wearing their pajamas on the bottom, right? We also talked about different communication channels for them, encouraging them to ask their teams how their teams prefer to communicate with each other remotely, whether it's Slack versus email versus quick syncs, making sure that they set that precedent from the beginning. And then, of course, we encourage them to establish personal connections. I mean, it can be intimidating to set up virtual coffee chats with people that you don't know, but we try to just emphasize that you're here to learn this summer. Our engineering teams are super excited to have you on board and are excited for you to bring your fresh perspective to the table. And so reach out, don't be afraid, and make those connections. And if you need additional support, lean on your recruiter to have them facilitate an introduction so you can really take advantage of your internship, even though it's remote and you might not be able to meet someone in the hallways.
Awesome. Thank you. Emily, let's switch gears and talk about metrics and how you think about measuring the success of your internship program. So if you could talk a little bit about what that looks like. Obviously, you talked about conversion being an important aspect earlier. Other core metrics that you look at. And then the second part of that question is, have any of those metrics changed as a result of moving to a remote internship?
Yeah. So for the internship, the metrics are going to be conversion, net promoter score at the end of the program, I feel like are the two biggest indicators of how successful it was. But that's not going to be really helpful for us, like trying to on the fly fix what we're doing. So my recommendation is we have Culture Amp. If anyone has Culture Amp, you can utilize that. You can utilize Google Forms, SurveyMonkey, whatever works. But to do a pulse survey at the 3-ish week mark, maybe, to see how people are adapting, what what confusion that they have, what they like, what they don't like, and really getting a good sense of what's going on, I think is going to be really impactful, collecting that data and course correcting along the way. So that's our plan of making sure that we're using metrics to drive towards success. As far as the decision right now, that we don't really have any metrics that are driving anything except for previous metrics of successful internship programs, which led us to keep the program. But as far as the program itself, we'll have to kind of figure that out along the way. We just want to make sure we're being agile and collecting the data early. And so I'd recommend that for everyone.
Okay, great. Josh, why don't we shift gears and talk about how you're thinking about the fall. So we've seen obviously different schools responding to the pandemic in various ways. Some are taking a wait and see approach for the fall. We've seen other schools, as an example, already announce that it'll be remote and online for fall and winter. So I'm just curious how you're adjusting your plans accordingly, or how are you looking at the fall season?
Yeah, and let me just say, Jason, I just realized my battery's running low. So if I go off video for a minute to go get a plug-in, just a heads up. So apologies for that.
Thank you.
Back to your question. Thank you. Yeah, so as of right now, right, we don't have all the details of how campuses are going to move forward. I'm hearing that some are going to still have students remote. Some are planning to bring them back to campus. Some are going to continue to have on-campus events in person. So being mindful of that, we're taking a look at both the on-campus and virtual plays. We're taking a look at technologies that will best allow for that interaction with students where they are, whether that be WebEx, virtual info sessions, office hours, et cetera, for the fall season. At the end of the day, we're still committed to providing a great intern or full-time associate opportunities for these students, and we'll continue to work with the universities and career centers to determine the best approaches to meet the needs of their students.
Okay, awesome. Josh, we'll let you go get a charger. And Kristen, why don't we turn over to you and talk about the fall season as well, how you're thinking about it, if you have any plans right now, and how you're approaching it.
Yeah, so I think like a lot is up in the air, as Josh was alluding to, right? Like we don't really know what universities are going to be doing come fall recruitment season. And so with that, it is hard to plan a strategy on our end. That being said, I think that the approach we'll most likely be taking is planning for 100% virtual fall recruitment strategy, with like the very small possibility that we might be able to host a couple of events in person. The goal would be to plan like a few of our events so that we could pick virtual events that we could pivot to be in person pretty seamlessly, and maybe we'd only go to local universities. Even then, I personally prioritize the safety of my team, and so I think that circumstances would really have to change in order for us to be traveling this fall. That being said, there definitely are pros and cons to going fully virtual. On one hand, we have the opportunity to reach and engage students at universities we aren't normally able to partner with, mainly because my small but mighty team can physically only be in so many places at once. And then on the other hand, I do worry about virtual overload and how we can stand out in a virtual marketplace. So especially with so many companies being forced to cancel their internships this summer and shifting to hosting virtual skill building opportunities for former interns to participate in during the summer months. So it's going to be crucial to our success that we ask students what type of content or virtual event do they want from us. And we're really going to have to get creative to keep students engaged virtually. I also think that there's a strong likelihood the talent pools this fall is going to be smaller, with more, research is showing that more and more students are considering continuing their education just given the current economy and many other factors, right? This combined with the fact that many students no longer have internships this summer will probably push us to shift our fall recruitment strategy up in terms of timeline. I think we'll still continue to open up our positions come August, early September, but we need to be building our talent brand now and starting the dialogue with students starting like today. Another big question mark for us, and this may be the case for a lot of folks, but are we going to know our hiring numbers come September, August, when we go to open up our positions, when we normally kick off fall recruitment? I think we're going to have to do our best to plan early but also just keep an open mind and be ready to flex in new and innovative ways when the time comes.
Great. We are getting a significant number of questions through the live Q&A, and we're almost done with some of the questions that we had received from registrants before, so we'll switch to the live Q&A in just a moment. Another question that came in is, what is a significant accomplishment or success around your university recruiting programs? If you had to pick one thing that you're really proud of, what would that be? So Emily, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, I'll say 65% of our women engineers came from our program. So that's my biggest accomplishment, and want to replicate that for underrepresented minorities as well.
That's amazing. Thank you. Josh, welcome back. How about you?
Sorry, taking myself off mute. I'd say two things. I think the fact that we're still able to provide that internship, even though it might be remote. With that, and given the industry that we're in, we've actually been able to, we are looking to add and hire an additional 100 interns into our program, specifically on the tech side, our business analyst side, and some for our MBA and grad level as well. So we've been able to reach out to some key partners or campuses and schools that we've worked with to try and quickly reach out, especially for those students at some of these schools where they have been affected and offers have been rescinded. So the fact that we're able to very quickly adjust and try to bring on an additional 100 interns is something that I'm really proud of with the organization. And secondly, is just being in an industry that is at the forefront of the pandemic, and just the great work that we're seeing come out of that due to just the nature of needing to get creative and innovative to try to respond to what's going on. So that has been really exciting, and you can see that in our coworkers and colleagues, and really taking to heart what we're doing and trying to bring hopefully some solutions to help address the situation.
Great. Thanks, Josh. Kristen, over to you.
Well, I hope that by the end of the summer, it's the fact that we're able to successfully run a fully remote intern program. But if I had to highlight one significant accomplishment today, I think that it would be the fact that it was just so easy for us to convince our engineering org to not cancel our intern program and shift to going fully remote. There wasn't a single person who said we shouldn't do it, not even at the finance level. And so I think that this just speaks volumes in terms of how highly valued our intern program is, and how much it contributes to the business from a standpoint of bringing in a set of diverse skill sets, direct impact on our OKRs, increasing retention, and just really all that the program gives to the engineering org as a whole.
Great. All right, let's talk a little bit about technology. So obviously there's lots of new recruiting technologies and tools that have come into the space over the last several years, even newer ones just to help with virtual work. Just curious if each of you could share one of the favorite tools that you or your team uses around recruiting and internship programs. So Emily, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, so we shifted to Jumpstart last year. Jumpstart is a kind of like a LinkedIn for students. I love it. I used Piazza previously, and they really upped their prices and wasn't a huge fan of their UI. And anyone who's used Piazza maybe has the same story. So I see Kristen laughing. So we made the shift to Jumpstart. It's been really great. They're a startup, but so many students have used it. And what I particularly like about it is that I'm using it to filter my inbound applications. So we had for all of our intern roles over 20,000 applications last year. And in Greenhouse, I could only look through them in chronological order in which they applied. So Jumpstart allows me to filter the inbound. Additionally, I can do outreach. I can do virtual events. I'm really looking forward to that in the fall. So I think they're a really great tool. I'm happy to talk about it if anyone is curious and wants to learn more offline.
Great. Kristen.
Yeah, so we don't have a relatively large budget, and so what we do is we usually leverage just one tool and then end up piloting another to see if it's something we want to use the following year. And so similarly to Emily, we've used the Piazzas, we've used Handshake. One of our favorite tools is actually also Jumpstart for all the same reasons that Emily just mentioned. But one tool that we've really been looking into leveraging more this summer as we look ahead to starting our fall recruitment earlier on and shifting it up to the summer months, we'll probably look to leverage a tool that's used by our industry recruiting team, which is GEM. And so GEM's an awesome tool to aid in your sourcing efforts and really allows you to track each touch point with candidates. So as we look to do that engagement piece earlier on in the summer months and keep in touch with students until our positions officially open, their sequencing feature where you can essentially schedule and coordinate specific emails to go out at different touch points throughout those summer months leading up to the opening of your applications, I think will be really crucial in terms of and valuable in terms of setting us up for success, and will help us nurture that talent until our positions open and we have a better understanding of what our headcount is going to look like.
Okay, great. And Josh, we'll wrap it with you and then we'll move to some additional live Q&A coming in.
Yeah, I think the tool I mentioned earlier, Double Dutch, is one that we're excited about, and seeing all the different capabilities within that and how we can utilize it this summer, really to create that engagement with the interns. The other tool that I'm excited about, which is not really facing the interns, but more for us and what we can bring to the business, is Domo, which is a reporting tool. And we're able to take a lot of this information that we've had to track manually in the past and have it all really condensed within this tool, and have it then provide us with the information that we're looking for, putting it in a very nice aesthetic kind of template and feel that we can then share out and slice and dice that information however we see fit, and then take that information to advise and consult the business. So those would be the two tech tools that we're probably the most excited about.
Great. All right, we're gonna switch over to some additional live Q&A. So just a reminder for attendees, if you have a question, you can use the Q&A chat or Q&A or chat feature. So the first question is, says, thanks for the great conversation. Kristen, you touched on this briefly around time zones and interns working in different time zones. Is the expectation that they will adapt to the home team schedule, or is there a more individualized compromise? So I don't know if you can add any additional context on there.
Yeah, so we've asked interns to work directly with their teams, with mentors and managers, because each team within our engineering org has different working hours. And so just establishing a way to have as much overlap as possible. If the intern's on the East Coast, there may not be like an entire 8-hour overlap. An intern may sign on an hour earlier than the teams, but for engineering specifically, I think it will be all right, because most folks on the engineering side don't come in until 11 a.m. anyways, at least, or 10 a.m. That's what we see on the student side. So for them, I think that's kind of like a dream scenario in terms of working with the team on a West Coast, because when they log on at 10 a.m., their team will probably be logging on within the next hour or so. So again, going back to the main thing we're encouraging them to do is to work with their teams directly and establishing that from the beginning, which I think is crucial. So there's no miscommunication there in terms of what the expectation is of when the intern needs to be online. Okay,
great. Thank you. Next question coming in from Bill O'Connor. Is there an expectation of spring graduates who did not land jobs or had jobs fall through to flood the fall recruiting season? So any thoughts on how that may impact the market over the coming months for any of you to jump in?
Yeah, I think that there will be. And so because there's not as many conversion and maybe not as many job openings available. So I think there are going to be a lot of new grads that are going to be looking for roles. I also think there's already a lot of new grads that are looking for roles right now. I mean, some big ones for us were like Uber, Lyft, and Airbnb all rescinded like their new grad offers. So we're in a position to maybe overhire. So we're looking at that. So that can be advantageous for some companies who can do that. But I do think it will be a totally interesting market shift for those who can't provide experiences this summer or had to take away their internships or whatever it may be, if you can still provide some sort of networking, some sort of touch point, some sort of, hey, our CEO is going to talk for an hour and anyone who is an intern was an intern can join. I think those things are still really impactful to get as much skill building as possible, but I do think the market's going to be really, really crazy next fall. And then on top of that, we won't be on campus to recruit. So it's going to be a very bizarre.
Great. Next question. So we're going to try to get through these as quickly as we can because we have lots of exciting questions around. Some of these are new and some are just adding some additional context from earlier. So this question is from Maddie. Did your hiring teams have to scale back expectations around the review process or reset the review process? I know earlier we alluded to some internships program being cut by 2 weeks or starting 2 weeks later, et cetera. So has the review process changed as a result of any program changes?
I will say that we have not looked to make any changes, making sure here. It'll just be, again, a little bit more expedited, obviously, but giving that awareness and knowing that that will be the case. We typically do that to that midterm review and then the final review. And obviously that's going to be more condensed, but our plan is to still continue with that and move forward business as usual.
Okay, great. Thanks, Josh. Next question is on hosting virtual events. Which platform or software would you suggest? I know, Emily, you mentioned one. I think, was it Jumpstart that also has the virtual?
Yeah, so Jumpstart is good because you can do virtual events, and then Handshake can be good to do virtual events because they are more closely linked with the colleges. So colleges and universities all have Handshake accounts, and that is a really good opportunity too. The other thing that you can do is just host your own Zoom or Facebook Live and reach out to different events, whatever sourcing tool you have, even if it's like LinkedIn. So there's a bunch of different options. I know Josh talked about Double Dutch, which I'm totally going to look up. There's another platform that I've used recently called Hopin, which is pretty cool too, and I don't think that expensive. So something you can look in as well for networking and events, and it has everything. So that's another tool.
Great. Any other virtual platforms to add, Kristen or Josh?
I think Emily touched on the majority of them. One thing I will add for those of you who use Slack, my team discovered a new feature earlier this morning. So it's very similar to Donut if your companies use that, but it's actually free. It's called Snack. And it's meant for virtual intern programs to connect interns on a weekly basis. And it has a cool feature where it kicks off each session with an icebreaker, and then it also pairs folks based on their interests, so they can indicate that they fill out a short little survey, and we'll match people week over week, which again, we just discovered it this morning, but it sounds pretty cool. It's called Snack on Slack.
Awesome. It sounds delicious. All right, we have a question from Izzy. What major pieces of advice would you have for those of us that had to transition our internships to either being unpaid or remote? We're a hospitality company, so you can imagine some of the roadblocks we faced. So I know each of you are in different industries, but if there's any advice that you could provide around moving to unpaid internships or for industries that may have been hit harder that are still able to continue with their programs.
I think what Emily was mentioning earlier around offering anything you can from a standpoint of like skill building, networking with maybe leaders within your company, and just offering those opportunities that take very little lift to create. Well, skill building, not so much, but scheduling like an AMA or a short discussion with leaders should hopefully be pretty light lifting. So doing things like that, and then also just leading with transparency and honesty, right, with folks all throughout the summer months, and starting that dialogue early on with students and letting them know like your current situation and how you're prepared, how you're audibling, and then how you're thinking about the fall recruitment season. I think that from what I've heard from students that they appreciate that so much, and it goes a really long way in terms of keeping your brand top of mind for folks.
Okay.
I would completely agree with that. I think it's with the transparency and the honesty, it's also leading with compassion and empathy. We really drove that with our teams, and as they're doing the outreach and talking with these candidates, being mindful of the situation. We're all being affected by this, and it's turned everything upside down. And just simply acknowledging that, right? And what questions do you have? And continue to be curious and see how they're feeling. For those that are no longer able to pay, if they're continuing to stick with you, that must say something, I think, about your organization and your culture, that they're choosing to stick with that anyway. So there must be something you're doing right already. But that would be my additional thoughts on that.
Okay.
With that too, I think one of the biggest points and learning lessons from this as well is not necessarily to that topic, but how this is affecting everyone. We don't know what everyone's family situations are, how they've been affected by this pandemic. And also a virtual environment can introduce so many new biases that we really need to be mindful of, like what people's Zoom backgrounds look like or what their internet connection is like. And I think we need to be cognizant of that and recognize that bias so that we're not making bad decisions in the end about hiring.
Great. Thanks, Emily. Kristen, a question from Kate. If you can share the work from home tips and tricks board.
Yes, I could definitely. Jason, do you want me to pass that along to you? Are we sharing out when
Sure.
we share out the slides?
Yeah, if you share that, we'll include it in the follow-up email that goes out to everyone with the recording.
Cool. Sounds good.
Let's talk about swag. Everyone loves some good swag. So we have a question from Vanessa. Are any of you sending out promotional welcome packages to your incoming interns? So Emily, why don't we start with you, and then we'll hear from Kristen and then Josh.
Yeah, so we partner with a group called Sunrise. They're really amazing and eager for new clients if you guys are interested. But they're actually sending a box to each individual person. They open it up. It's a personalized note from campus with a bunch of swag in there. So we needed to collect addresses anyways to make sure everyone was registering in the right states and to get IT. And we'll be sending those boxes too. They're called Sunrise. I can share that too.
Great. Kristen.
Yeah, so we're shipping swag in 3 different shipments. We had prepared and already purchased all the swag before we decided to take things remote. And so we partner with social imprints and they're boxing everything up into 3 individual packages and then shipping them out during the first week of an intern's onboarding week, during the midpoint, and then towards the end of their last week, we're shipping out a package. And it includes anything of everything from we did noise canceling headphones to help with just their work from home environment, water bottles, air plants, coloring books, lots of fun different things.
Great. Josh.
Yeah, for us, we kind of going back a little bit, when they have accepted their offer, they are then sent, it triggers an email that provides them with a welcome gift. And they have a choice of 3 or 4 different gifts that they can have sent to them. So we do that. And then I think it's just for full-time associates, there is a care package that has, I'm not exactly sure all what it's inclusive of, but for our full-time hires, there is something that is shipped to their home address as a welcome. So.
Okay. We are almost at time, so I want to be respectful of everyone's time and ask one of you to answer this question. We still have a high number of questions we did not get to, but there was a question that came in around if you're doing any virtual training for interns. One example was through LinkedIn Learning as an example. Are there training opportunities for your interns outside of the work and the teams they're obviously part of? So Emily, if you want to share.
Yeah, so we're doing soft skill training in regards to, I think the biggest things we identified were receiving feedback and stress and time management. So those were 2 things that we identified as good learning lessons for them. Fortunately, our company uses Docebo for learning that we already do, but there's a lot of LinkedIn learnings about that that I would recommend. But my recommendation, I guess, overall would be identify the things that you want to help your interns with, and then find the resources available for them if you don't already have them in-house.
Perfect. Thank you. So we're at time. I want to thank Emily, Kristen, and Josh graciously for investing the last hour to help everyone as they're navigating through this new period of time. I would welcome anyone to connect with the group on LinkedIn. If you have additional questions we did not get to, we will share those out with the panelists. And if you have any other questions you want to email in, we'll try to get to those as well. I also want to thank Alio again for their sponsorship, and to stay tuned for future webinars. Visit recruiters.network. Thanks everyone. I hope you have a great rest of the day.
Bye. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.